Welcome to Conversations with Coach Lloyd. Today, my guest is Coach Robert Clarence. So after racing bikes for over 15 years, in 2005, he decided to switch to multisport, triathlon and duathlon, to avoid the crash fest that bike racing can be. His cycling background gave him an inkling of success, but it wasn't until he mastered the run off the bike that his racing became successful. He has numerous podium appearances and has raced at the USAT Nationals in the duathlon, as well as the 2019 ITU Duathlon World Championship. 10 years ago, after helping some new triathletes master cycling, he became a USA cycling coach and started his own cycling studio. Many OnPoint Fitness as well as BTA members can attest to the rigors of working out in his studio. Please welcome my guest, Coach Robert Clarence.
What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
I can't complain. You know, like all sports, it has its challenges, but you know, I'm in it for the fun. I'm enjoying it, so I just keep doing my thing. You know.
Good. I know how that can be.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to dive in. I mean, we've known each other for a number of years. We've been coaching triathletes in the DC area, and there's so much good information about cycling. I figured it'd be great to chat with you and have you share some of that information with everyone. So the first thing I want to jump into is triathlon versus duathlon.
Okay.
You know, in the world of multisport, whenever people are starting to get in, they always, you know, the first thing they start talking about is, I want to do a triathlon. But, you know, you're a big proponent of duathlon. So you're one of the coaches I know out there who when everyone is all sipping the Kool-Aid of let's do a triathlon, you're the first one to be like, hey, have you considered duathlon? You know, let's not sleep on duathlon. So tell the folks a little bit about duathlon.
All right. So duathlon is definitely the bad stepchild of triathlon. There's no doubt about it. Triathlon gets all the press and all the, you know, awards and medals, and, you know, for good reason, right? I mean, it's sort of like the highest pinnacle of the sport for multisport. I get that. But the way I actually came to duathlon is actually rather amusing. One of the things is, you know, personally, one of the reasons I didn't start triathlon earlier was because I'm originally from New York City. And when I first started looking into places to swim in New York, it was prohibitively expensive. Like,
Okay.
you know, I could walk out my door and run anytime I wanted, but trying to get to a place where it had a pool that was easily accessible on a regular basis was actually pretty difficult. And as I started to talk to more and more people of color, they also had that same challenge. You know, they didn't have a really good place to swim, or the places to swim were really expensive.
Okay.
And so that just made duathlon a lot more accessible initially. Right. So not that I had anything against triathlon, because I wanted to try one for years, but it's just I didn't really have access to a pool like that would have made me confident enough to be like, all right, I'm ready to take on this sport. Then when I moved to Maryland and I was like, wow, the aquatic centers here, I can go to a pool for like $6. I was like, okay, I can give this a shot now. And so that's how I got into triathlon, was just because when I came to Maryland, it was much, much more accessible. But what I found was when I first started doing triathlon was I was just terrible running off the bike. I could run fine in a 5K or a 10K, but running off the bike, I was terrible. And so a friend of mine was like, well, why don't we do some duathlons? The extra running will help your run off the bike, because, you know, you get to run twice. So you're going to be more tired. You know, all that will sort of boost your fitness in the run. And I said, okay, sounds like a legitimate idea. Let's try that. And so for a couple of years, always the early part of the season, I would do duathlons, and I just started noticing that my run off the bike just improved immensely.
Okay.
And so I was like, not only that, you get to practice your transition twice, So, without having to strip off the wetsuit and it was just also a lot less intimidating to bring new people into, because most of the people I was working with were either didn't have formal swim experience or had very, very I haven't swam since I was 10 and I went to summer camp type experience. I really only knew like one or two people who had a serious swim background. Everybody else was just kind of trying to figure it out. So duathlon was really accessible, and a lot of duathlons were short. On top of that, there was no real Ironman duathlon. Most of them were pretty short sprint. Occasionally you find an Olympic, but most of them were, they were easy enough to get somebody involved in. And then once they said, hey, I can do that, then it was easier to bring them along to triathlon, after that. So
with duathlon, is it the same distance structure like in tries?
It's similar. The major difference at the ITU level, the difference is that the shorter run comes last, which I love. So
break down what the ITU is.
So ITU is the international version of the sport. So what you have at the Olympic distance. So in the mostly in the United States, the duathlon has a short run first, a bike, and then a longer run second. ITU flips that. It's the long run first, the bike, and then the shorter run afterwards. So when you get off the bike, you don't have nearly as far to go. And so that's very appealing just to me, because having I'm a good short distance. I'm a much better short distance runner than I'm a long distance runner. So to me, that just fit right into my wheelhouse,
So when you say short is always a relative term.
Sure. So I'm talking this. So at the sprint level, it's a 2-mile run.
On the front end or the back end?
On the back end.
Okay.
So the ITU distance, a 5K. So it's going to be 5K, somewhere between a 12 and 15 mile bike, and then a 2-mile run. And then at the Olympic level, it's usually a 5K, a 25-mile bike, and then a 10K, a 25-mile bike, and then a 5K.
Okay.
So your run is front loaded. So you get that while you're nice and fresh,
Okay. So 5K on the front or a 10K on the front.
Right.
18 to 25 in the middle, and then 2 to 5K on the back end.
Right.
Okay. So it sounds like the pacing and the strategy, so that you don't die on the first mile of the run, comes into a real play compared to triathlon, where the swim is kind of like your warm up.
Right.
You don't really blow a gasket on the swim per se, whereas you could definitely blow it on a front run.
You definitely can, and that took me, to be honest, took me a few years to get that first run right. Because you're fresh on that first run, and you're tempted to go with people that you can hang with. If I can run this pace. Not realizing that that's going to come back to haunt you, an hour from now. So the pacing strategy is crucial in the duathlon. I mean, it is absolutely crucial. If you screw that up, you will suffer and suffer and suffer. And it wasn't until I came up with what I started doing was, my wife knows this. I used to always rail against the worst place to come in a duathlon is fourth. Right. So, and I say that because it's the first spot off the podium, right? Right? So it's like you can be 4th or 44th, you're still not on the podium, right? And what happened with me was about 2012, I did a duathlon, which I've been doing for like 3 or 4 years, and I came in 4th. And I didn't think much of it, right? I was like, I had never been on the podium, so I hadn't expected to be on the podium. I just came in 4th, but I just happened to look at the distance between 4th and 3rd, and I realized, hey, it's not that great. Maybe if I train a little bit harder or something, I could come in 3rd. So
if you plan for it,
right. So the next one, I came in 4th again. And so what I did was I went back and I started looking at the splits of the people who came in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And the difference that I noticed was their first run splits versus their second run splits were all within 15 seconds per mile. So if they ran 8 minutes for the first 5K, they were only like maybe about 8:15 for the second. Whereas mine, if I ran 8 for the first, I was running like 9:15 for the second. So I was like, okay, I got to pace this so that my second run is at least close to my first.
Okay.
And so gradually by working on that, I started to realize what it took to actually be competitive at that particular distance. So, and then of course I had to work out what my pacing on the bike was as well. But, that was something I knew from years and years of bike racing already. I kind of had a good idea of what I could hold and then get off and run reasonably. So yeah, that pacing strategy took me a couple years to figure out. But once I figured it out, I literally wrote it down, and I for everybody that I was working with for duathlons, I was like, this is our goal. We got to get you to the point where you can run effectively off the bike, almost as well as you did on that first run.
On the first one.
Right. So that was a major.
With that one, I mean, I'm thinking of when you said, hey, coming from New York with the access to pools, and then you got here and there was so much more access. Like right now, I know several events have been, big swim events early season have been canceled because of the lack of access to, pools for everyone. So, I mean, I can only imagine that duathlons might be a great, get a big boost this season,
right?
Just based on, the lack of access to pools throughout the country.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sure that's true. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And one of the things I also started noticing was a lot of race directors even before the pandemic started like adding a duathlon to their races. So like on the day they'd have the sprint, they'd also have a duathlon just to try and co-opt those runners who didn't, feel like they wanted to learn how to swim. Because I have a buddy of mine who I ride with a lot, and he's actually a marathoner, and he's like, man, I don't want to go to the pool. I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to have to buy goggles. He just didn't want to be bothered. But he'll go do a duathlon because, it's like, hey, it's running, right? I know how to do that. So, yeah, so there's that familiarity, there's less of the, it's open water, you get rid of all that anxiety because, you get to the last run. If you're tired, you just walk, we all know how to do that, there's no anxiety there, I'll finish. So,
right. That's true. That's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of early season duathlons right at the beginning of the year that there's a couple in New York, a couple down here that I think are just great, and they're short. So they're a great way to kind of get started, before the season, before you're, full into the pool and in open water. So just, a good way to start getting in shape as well.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I know even with, it's funny where you say some folks wanted to skip the swim and just hit the bike and the run. I remember when we first started to talk, I was always like, let's skip the bike and let's just do the swim and the run.
That's right. I remember the first time I met you, we were riding, and I was like, yeah, so, I heard you do Ironmans. You must love riding. You're like, no, I hate the bike. I was like, who rides 112 miles and doesn't like the bike?
I mean, in the last 5 years, my attitude on the bike has shifted slightly.
Well, that's good.
But yeah, give me a swim and a run combo any day, and I'm like, yep, sign me up. Let's skip the bike.
I hear you.
So, but okay, so with duathlons, focusing on the bike and run, one of the things the other point that you always stress, which I really enjoy, is when most folks start talking about triathlon, they're always thinking of moving up in distance,
right?
So you'll come across a lot of people who, their friend, whoever told them about doing triathlon, and the first thing they thought of was, oh, I've got to do an Ironman, whether they know how to swim or not, whether they own a bike or not, that's kind of like their thing that they want to go to.
Right.
And you have been one of the few coaches who are always saying, enjoy the short distances,
right?
With no desire per se to say, I've got to do the long distance. Like you could have a nice, fun, long career enjoying the short distances, and you're like a big advocate of that. So you're the one coach I know who, when everyone's always talking about big distances, you're like, whoa. Have you mastered this particular distance before you even think about doing the next one?
Right. I'm a big proponent of, learn as you go, get better, get good at this, then, increase your skill set, get good at that. And then, it reminds me of a lot of people who've never run and are like, I think I'm going to do a marathon this week, I mean, and the thing, one of the reasons why I just think it's better to start at the shorter distances is just because of the injury factor with the amount of running you have to do for, the Ironman distance. I mean, when you couple that with all the other stuff you have to be doing, strength training, all that amount of running, unless you have if you have a really strong running background, more power to you, go for it, But a lot of people come into the sport with, not a real strong running background. And I just think at the longer distances, it takes some time just to build up, the ligature, the excuse me, just, the ligaments and tendons, get them used to running those kind of distances. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to start off short and build your way up.
Well, everyone builds their way up, but even when folks are building, I know you're the one like, what's the rush?
Yeah,
so,
right. Yeah, I'm like,
most people when they start talking about it, they're talking like a short 2-3 year window, maybe. And in this day and age, that's considered fast.
Right.
Because whereas you're like, hey, spend at least two or three seasons in one distance before you even think about the next distance.
Right. I mean, I used to have a cycling coach, and his thing was always master the skill. Like before you decide to go to a different discipline, master the discipline that you're at. Like you should know exactly what you have to do to train to be your best at that discipline. And then when you've got that down, then you can augment that by adding something new,
Okay.
So that was always the thing, master the discipline. Don't move from the Olympic to the half Ironman until you know exactly what it takes to go out on an Olympic distance and just crush it. And whatever that is for you, it doesn't have to be the podium or anything, but like for instance, I know I can get up tomorrow and with a minimal amount of training, go do an Olympic distance triathlon and probably be under 3 hours, no problem. Because I know what I have to do. I know how I have to train to make that happen.
Okay.
Like, I know exactly what I have to do. And if I don't do it, I know I won't accomplish what my goal was, right?
Right.
You don't have to do it, but you also have to know how to do it, right? So once you know how to do it, then you can start working on the next level because you have to learn how to do it correctly. And chances are you're gonna not get it the first time around. You're probably gonna miss something. Maybe you didn't have enough nutrition this time, or maybe you didn't train hard enough on this particular leg, or maybe you overemphasized something, or maybe you trained while you were hurt. There's all kinds of things that can go into, making your event not go off perfectly. Maybe that you trained on the wrong terrain. You trained on a flat course and the event you chose was hilly. There's all kinds of things that you really need to just get used to before you can say, all right, I have mastered this discipline. I am now ready to move on to the next one. So I remember I was talking to a good friend of mine who's an excellent Ironman triathlete. And he was like, he was like, I think for everybody, the Ironman is a 2-year learning experience of, 70.3s for 2 years. And to the point that, okay, I now know everything I need to know about 70.3. I am now ready to step up to that next distance. And I just see a lot of people say, I got my 170.3. I did it. I'm ready. And it's like, I mean, I've done a bunch of 70.3s and I still don't think I have it right for me. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I know how to ace this exam.
Right.
I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. So I want all the people I work with, I was like, I want you to know when you get on the course, you're going to ace the exam. That's a really powerful feeling for an athlete, to go out and know I'm going to crush it today, unless somebody crashes me out or something.
Right.
I'm ready for this. And so I want everybody to take that feeling into their race. I want everybody to have that kind of confidence when they get to the race course,
Yeah, I like that. I mean, yeah, I think that's something we always instill in athletes as they're training to just have that confidence. Now, going into let's dive into the sprint and Olympic of tries as well as duathlons.
Okay.
For new cyclists, what kind of things are new cyclists, should they know as they're getting out on the road? And, you know, what skills, you know, if I'm getting into the sport, what kind of skills do I need to make sure I know that I didn't even know I needed to know?
So there's a couple things. I went to a duathlon this morning, as a matter of fact, to watch, and you know, it's just incredible how few new cyclists have any idea about their gearing whatsoever. Like, they have just no concept of what gear they should be in, when they should change their gears, you know, whether they should change them at the bottom of the hill, the top of the hill, the middle of the hill, what gear, you know, they don't know what gear they're comfortable in. You know, right. That's one of the major things. So gearing and cadence are the two things that I find new cyclists really need to learn and understand, because that will change your whole experience on the bike, you know?
Okay.
So really learning to understand, knowing when to shift gears, what gear you should be in, what gear you should be racing in, and having trained in that gear and knowing when to when to shift gears, when not to shift gears. You know, you see that hill coming. Should I be shifting now? Should I be waiting till I'm halfway up the hill? Should I be shifting at the top of the hill? All those things, you know, take practice, and you really have to understand them prior to showing up at the race course. We saw a woman today who was riding a single speed on a hilly course.
Whoa.
Right. And so afterwards, and I was like, why did you ride a single speed for this course? She was like,
wow.
My husband told me to. I was like, yeah, well, he was riding it with his legs, not yours. You know? So
we're gonna have a long talk later, that's for sure.
Right. I told her, it's a good thing divorce lawyers don't hang out at multisport.
Yeah. That's gonna be a long drive home, you know, or a conversation. That's right.
Sure. Exactly.
So with gearing, when should I be changing gear? What gear should I be in? You know, flat versus hill, like you said, when I'm going up the hill, at the top of the hill, when should I in general be looking to change my gears?
So the first thing you want to know before we even talk about what gear you're in, the first thing you want to know is, you know, what should my cadence be while I'm riding, right?
Okay. So what should my cadence be?
So everybody's a little different, right? I train people to have to work on a cadence of 90, right? Okay. That's the goal. Now, some people will be a little bit above 90. Some people will be a little bit below 90. You know, should be probably in the 85 to 100 range, right? Everybody's a little different. Some people are much more quad dominant and can push a bigger gear. Some people are smaller and slighter and have better aerobic capacity, so they might spin a smaller gear. That's all good. You know, we find out during training, you know, what your best cadence is.
Okay.
So once you're at so when you're on a flat, you want to be at your optimal cadence, which is anywhere between 85 and 95 for most people, right? So you're tooling along at 85 to 90. You're on the flats. You see a hill coming up. The first thing you want to do is you want to keep your cadence as you're going up a hill relatively up. You don't want to let it slip down into the 50s or 60s and you're like killing yourself to get up the hill. So no grinding the gears going up the hill? No, not unless it's one hill and the finish is at the top. You know, if you're racing, if the finish line is at the top, yeah, go ahead, do whatever you got to do to get up.
You're gonna hurt a lot of feelings for those who are listening.
Yeah.
No, so all right, so I've got to keep my cadence even on the hill. Go ahead.
So I mean, it's gonna fall somewhat, but you want to probably keep it between 75 and 85. You know, unless it's ridiculously steep. In which case, you know, you just got to do what you got to do to get over it. You know, right. There's some things that are so steep you won't have any choice. But most hills, you know, are going to average between 3 and 7 or 8%, and you should try and keep a cadence that you can keep between 75 and 80. And to do that, you're going to have to know what gear, you know, you can turn at 75 or 80, and that's where I say it's important to learn. Like one of the things we do at our bike clinics, I ask people, I was like, what's your gearing? And then I don't know. Like, how many gears do you have on your cassette? They're like, I don't know. You know, you got to know that stuff. You know,
okay.
If you go to get your bike or buy your bike, ask those questions. Hey, how many gears do I have on the back there? You know, what's the smallest cog I have on the back? Because that's going to matter. That the small, you know, that biggest cog on the back of your cassette is going to be the limit of how fast you can spin. Once you get there, you can't go any lower, So you need to know those kind of things so that, if they're not giving you the right gear or you need more gear, you can say, hey, this wasn't big and I need something that'll make it a little easier to climb these hills with. So that's the one like major thing I see for like new cyclists to multisport is they just don't know enough about their gearing and they just need to learn that.
So for them, it's a matter of I've got my bike out there. I need to put it in a gear that allows me to spin at 85 to 90, 95,
right,
and get comfortable with that cadence.
That's correct, and that takes time. You don't get that immediately. And one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people I've coached is when they first start to spin at 90, they say, "It feels like I'm not doing anything."
Right.
It feels like I'm not working because they're used to like, it's gotta feel hard. Like,
right, the grind.
We're trying to make it so that when you get off the bike, your legs still work. If you're good.
No. How? So with that in the back of my head, right? The question that always comes is, but if I don't feel like if I'm doing and everybody is passing me, why don't I move up to the bigger gear so that I can at least keep up with everybody else on the ride? Because I don't feel like I'm doing anything, and I'm getting left. How do I work? How do I work for that?
I'll use my own personal experience as a way of illustrating why that doesn't work. So when I first got into multisport, coming from a cycling background, I was used to doing time trials where you basically get on your bike, ride as hard as you can till the finish line, then you pass out at the finish line. And that's pretty much how I used to ride the bike portion of any multisport event. And then all those people that I passed on the bike would just pass me on the run because I was dead. Like literally, I'd end up walking, a mile into the run because I was just finished. I had nothing left. How you pace your bike is going to be indicative of how your run is. And people forget that, you have to have fresh legs coming off the bike. Otherwise, everything you did on the bike was for nothing. It's just sad but true. I wish it wasn't that way, but that's really the way it is. So you really want to spin because you want to have some legs for the run, and you got to keep that in the back of your mind. Your bike is your run setup. It's important, but it is more important in the fact that it is going to make your run either spectacular or just a disaster. So you can't worry about people passing you. You will see them all again if they're pushing too big a gear. I guarantee it.
I mean, you always know who those athletes are because at the end of the race, they're just telling you about that amazing bike split.
Right. Like, I had the best bike split. What you come in 90th?
Right. We're not even talking about your positioning. It's simply that, man, you know what? I crushed that bike. We're not talking about the first run or swim or the second or the actual the second run. We're only talking about, man, I crushed that bike. And we don't discuss how it affected everything else for the day.
Right. Well, there's the old saying that we used to have was, ride for show, run for dough. And it's true. It's true. I mean, when I was not getting on the podium, I would oftentimes have the best bike split in my age group, but I was no place near the podium because I just could not run after that. And it wasn't until I decided to give up a little on the bike and really focus on making my run strong afterwards that, I was able to get some success. And it's the same thing. You really need to save your legs for the run. And the only way, unless you're just a phenomenally strong cyclist, the only way you can really do that is if you're spinning.
All right. So gotta spin. So new cyclist, I've got to make sure that I figure out my gearing. Well, first off, I figure out my cadence, get into a good cadence in that 85, 90, 95 range so that I don't feel like if I'm doing anything. Then I figure out what my gearing should be so that I can maintain that.
Right.
Now you mentioned, hills. Am I changing at the bottom of the hill, the middle of the hill, the top of the hill? I know there are variables all around.
Right. But Basically, when your cadence starts to drop by more than about 5 revolutions per minute, that's your key to say, I need a smaller gear.
Got it.
I mean, that's just a general rule of thumb. It obviously depends on how long if the hill's 5 miles long, it's a little different than if it's like, a quarter of a mile long, right?
Right.
So you can get away with stuff for a quarter of a mile that you're not going to do for a 5 mile climb. But generally, as your cadence starts to drop by more than 5 to 7 RPM per minute, that's your cue to say, hey, I need a smaller gear here. I need to be able to spin a little bit better. That's just a general rule of thumb. That will work for most circumstances.
Now I know one of the tips that you've given me, years ago when I absolutely did not like the bike, as I was beginning my journey to enjoy it somewhat. Was kind of like anticipating what gearing I would need, closer to the top of the hill, and just kind of set myself up for that from the very beginning and spin until I hit that point on the hill.
Right. Well, one of the things that you learn in bike racing is, people who get dropped in bike races don't get dropped at the bottom of the hill. Usually they get dropped at the top, right? Which didn't seem to make any sense to me when I first started, because I was like, well, if I got up here with all of them, how is it that they are now just taking off and I'm just still sitting here at the top? So yeah, what you want to do is, you want to recover when you get over the top, but you don't want to coast over that. You don't want to get to the top and just go, oh, I'm done. You want to get to the top, and now you want to start reapplying that pressure to the pedals that you kind of were dialing back as you were coming up the hill. So you want to get right back on top of that gear and start working on getting back up to the pace you were at, before you started climbing that hill. And that takes a little practice. And one of the things I recommend for people who aren't good at climbing is you go out and do some hill repeats. Much like, for running, that'll make you better. You go out and you work on some hills. You go out one day, one of your hard days, maybe on the weekend, you go find yourself a hill that takes about 4 or 5 minutes to climb. Yeah. You go climb it, turn around, go back down. Wait till you're recovered, go back up. You do that 5 or 6 times. Trust me, for an hour, you'll be done, but you'll learn. You'll start to realize, when do I start to feel good on the hill? When do, have I go and try it with different gears. Maybe you can get up a little faster in this gear. Maybe this gear is too small. And that's how you start to build your confidence on the hill. Knowing when you know what gear you're supposed to be in, and you know how long it's going to take you, and you know how hard you can push, then you don't get you don't lose. It doesn't get in your head. Hills are very mental. They're almost more mental than physical sometimes. People see it coming and they already start to like, this is going to be bad. Right. That's not the way you should be. You should look at it and be like, I got this, because I know exactly how I'm going up. I know exactly what I have to do to get over this. And so when you get to the top of the hill, you should have gone up at a pace you can handle and a gear you can handle, so that when you get to the top, now you just turn that power right back on and you go. Okay.
I've been able to do that on a couple hills. Not necessarily all of them, but
there are some that you just can't do that on.
Yeah. In theory, when it's worked out, it's worked out really well.
And the other thing that I would like to point out too, that a lot of beginning cyclists need to work on, is their ability to descend. Like, that's something we don't talk about too much. But going downhill can be a terrifying experience if you're not prepared for it.
So walk me through that, because I'm one of those folks who have no fear on the descent.
Right.
But I do have several clients and who, like you described, they will ride the brakes virtually the whole way down the hill,
which is about the worst thing you can do on a hill. It really is. And descending is really more mental than physical.
Okay.
Most descents aren't very tricky and aren't very hard, but it's the acceleration that gets people, right? 1 minute you're going 0 miles an hour, and the next minute you feel like you're about to go 35 miles an hour, right?
Right.
And so that feeling, that kind of roller coaster effect, where all of a sudden you're just picking up speed. That takes a little getting used to, and you really need to do it a few times to get used to that feeling. But the other thing that you definitely don't want to do is you don't want to hold the brakes for 2 reasons. One, it slows you down, right? Mm-hmm. That's the only place in multisport where you get speed for free. Right? I mean, you don't have to do any work.
Right. Right.
That's the part you should enjoy the most. But also, when you're going, if you have to corner, the last thing you want to be is on your brakes. You want to have traction on your wheels. You want to be pedaling a little bit. You don't have to pedal hard, but you want to have traction going to your wheels at all time. So if you hit something like gravel or something, your wheels don't just come out from under you. So you always want to have some traction and some power going to your wheels. You always want to have, you want to be in a good position on the bike. In other words, you don't want to be, holding the bars like this. You want to be really relaxed. And those things take some time and some practice. And you got to practice them. If you don't practice them, it's hard to feel comfortable doing it.
So basically when I do the hill repeats to work on my ascent,
you practice
it's that same workout, I get to practice it coming down.
Right. See how fast you can get down. I mean, that's one of the things you can do as well. Is practice going down a little faster every single time. Hit the brakes, and that sometimes you're gonna come to a place where you have to brake. See how late you can actually make that brake. I want to go as far as I can without braking before I actually hit those brakes.
Okay.
And the other thing is, you don't want to slam on brakes. You want to feather brakes. You want to hit them both together, nice and easy, so that you don't lock your wheels up.
Yeah. So walk me through using both brakes, because I think a lot of people have a tendency to just use one.
Yeah, well, first of all, a lot of people are terrified of the front brake because of all of the bad press it gets, right? But because if you hit your front brake too hard, you're going over the handlebars, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, the front brake is where most of your stopping power is. So if you need to stop really fast, you need that front brake because that's where most of your braking power is. But you have to apply it judiciously. You can't apply it all by itself. Your back brake is what slows you down. Your front brake is what brings you to a stop. So you get on the back brake to start slowing you down and start easing onto that front brake. And the other thing is your position on the bike. As you want to slow down, you push yourself back on the bike. Take the weight off the front of the bike so that the bike doesn't have a tendency to flip over. Because remember, you're going down. So most of your weight is in the front of the bike. You want to sit back further and then use your brakes.
Okay, so I'm slowing down with the back brake,
right? And
I'm coming to a stop with the front. I'm feathering the brakes so that you don't go over the handlebars.
Right.
Now you're putting some weight on the back.
Absolutely, yeah. You want to push your weight a little bit further back on the saddle so that you have more weight over the back wheel, so that it won't slide out from under you. So yeah, all of those are really, really important and really, really helpful for slowing down quickly.
Okay. Well, on that same idea of being on the back of the bike a little bit with positioning, let me transition to road bike versus tri bike.
Okay.
With triathletes getting into the sport again with beginners, we all get bike envy. You're gonna walk in a transition. You're gonna see all the bikes out there. You're gonna see, some that are worth more than a car, and some that are like, okay,
right.
It is what it is. So how do I decide? Do I do a road bike? Do I do a tri bike? What's your thought process on when do I use what I have? When do I switch over? When do I always get N+1? And get an extra bike? What's that?
So, well, me, I would say you should always have N+1. There's no doubt about that. But I counsel people that they should start on a road bike. It's more comfortable and it's easier to handle. Right? Those are the two major things. Like tri bikes their geometry is just not as forgiving and not as friendly, especially if you don't have a lot of experience, on a bike to begin with. So I always like to say, let's start on a road bike. You can still get very, very aerodynamic on a road bike. One of the big things that people miss about, whether you're on a road bike or a tri bike is the position that you're actually on the bike. I mean, we see a lot of people at races on their road bike, sitting up like this with their hands on, that you basically made yourself a big sail. The wind is just saying, I don't want to go fast, just stop me.
You see that with folks on tri bikes as well.
You see that I was going to say that. You see the same thing. I was at the race today and I saw people who never got on their aero bars, even though they had them. You know, they was just sat up because it takes a while to get comfortable in that position. It's not a natural position by any stretch of the imagination. And also, it's much further forward on the bike than you are on your road bike. Road bikes tend to be a lot more relaxed. You tend to be sitting more upright. It's more kind of like being on a stationary bike from just a comfort standpoint. Whereas a tri-bike, you've now pushed everything forward because you want to get into a more aerodynamic position, assuming, you know, you were going to be on the aero bars. So your seat's further forward. There's more weight over the front of the bike. And all that stuff, you know, takes time to get used to. Not to mention handling the bike when you're in the aero bars. You know, going around corners, going around a bump or something like that. Hitting a bump on the aero bars is very different than hitting it when you're holding onto the handlebars with your brakes. And the other thing is when you're on the aero bars, you have no brakes at that moment, right? Your brakes are far away from your hands. So, you know, if you're already not super comfortable with going fast, and now you're going downhill in your aero bars all of a sudden, you know, so you put yourself in a very, very uncomfortable position just like that. Right. So so I try to counsel people, get really comfortable on your road bike, and then after you feel like I can do anything on my road bike, then start thinking about, okay, let me try getting on a tri bike, seeing how that feels, seeing how it's different. And I tell people one of the good things you can do when you first get a tri bike is throw it up on your trainer and just try riding it on your trainer. I mean, you don't have to worry about turning. You don't have to worry. Just getting in that aero position like this. Yeah. I tell people, try and stay like that for 10 minutes and see how you feel. And you'd be surprised how many people can't even stay like that for 10 minutes. You know, you find the bars are too low or the seat's too high or it's too far forward or it's too far back. So all that whole bike fit concept is completely different on a tri bike. And it's going to, you know, even me who has three time trial bikes, it takes me at least 6 months every time I get a new one to get comfortable on it because this thing's a little different. This one's a little bit further forward. I need the stack to be a little bit higher, you know. And then as you get older, you know, you're not as flexible, you know. So I can't ride super low like I used to when I was 30, you know. Right. I need more stack because I can't get like down like I used to. So, you know,
I noticed my configuration has become more comfortable and less aggressive.
That's right.
Over the past couple of, you know, years, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the first bike I ever had with tri bars, I still have it. I bought it in 1990, either 1990 or 1991, and I take it out I ride it up and down my block, but no further than that. It looks really cool. But I never put it in a race.
Yeah, I remember my first season when I got my tri bike, I was like, you know, put me in the most aggressive aero position you can.
Right.
I think I got through one race and then I was like, okay, yeah, I can't survive in this position, you know.
You'll have back spasms for like a week.
It was super aggressive and super fast, but I'm like, man, this is not fun at all.
Yeah, you know? and of course, it also depends on the distance of the race you're doing. Like I can put my bike in a much more aggressive for a sprint than I could for like an Olympic or anything above it. For a sprint, I know I'm not going to be on the bike more than like 40 minutes, right? So I can handle it for 40 minutes. Right. Once you get over an hour, it's a whole different ball game, you know. Right. Ball game. So you know you can tweak it once you get used to it, but you know you still have to be. If you're not comfortable, it doesn't matter how aero you are.
Right. That's the big thing. It's like you've got to be comfortable with it, or else it just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be comfortable.
Yeah,
that is the most important thing.
So now with talking about bike fit, what kind of things should I be looking for, or you know, a beginner athlete when they go and they get their first bike, they get situated, what kind of questions are they looking to ask? What lets you know that, yes, this is a good bike fit for me? You know, just kind of walk me through that so that they have the right information.
So if you think about it, you're only attached to the bike by 5 points, right? Your butt, 2 feet, and your 2 hands, right?
Right.
And that's it. That's all that really touches the bike when you get right down to it. So I always say, well, the first thing you start with is seat height, right? The seat height's got to be good. So you have to have about a 15 to 20 degree bend in your knee when your foot's at the bottom of the pedal.
Okay.
That's a generalization. It's not exact for everybody, but that's a general rule of thumb. Start there, get your seat height right. Then the next thing you want to do is have your reach, how far you're actually reaching to get the handlebars. You don't want your arms straight, right? You want to have a nice little bend because these are your shock absorbers. When you hit a bump, this is what's going to absorb all that energy and hopefully keep you on the bike, right? So you have to make sure that the reach is right, and you have to make sure that the height is right. You don't want to be reaching down, and you don't want to be reaching up. And I've seen both. So you have to make sure that it's at a comfortable level for you, so that you can look when you're looking at the road. You know, you're not like this. You know, you're in a comfortable position. And then the next thing that's a little bit harder and takes usually a little bit longer is your foot position. And some of that has to do with what kind of pedals you have. Like if you have non-clipless pedals, if you're using either just regular flat pedals or clips and straps, then you're going to be a little bit it's going to be a little bit harder to get your feet in the perfect optimal position, because usually your feet will move around.
Okay.
You don't really want that, but you know, if that's before you go onto clipless pedals, that's pretty much what you're stuck with, right? The one thing you do want to have, even if you're not using clipless, is you want to have shoes that have a very solid sole. Like sneakers are terrible to ride in because every time you push down, some of that force is wasted into the sole to cushion, because that's what sneakers are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to absorb impact, not transmit it. So you want to have stiff sole shoes. You should have biking shoes, even if you're not using clipless pedals. And then once you move to clipless pedals, then you have to make sure that the cleat is positioned such that the ball of your foot should be over the center of the pedal spindle. And that may change a little bit depending on if you're bow-legged, or if you have some anomaly like leg length discrepancies and things like that. But essentially, you want to have your ball of your foot more or less over the middle of the pedal spindle. And those 5 points, you get those right, you'll be comfortable. And then after that, you can start experimenting with how you're going to actually sit on the bike. Are you going to sit upright? Are you going to crouch over? Are you going to be in the drops? Those kind of things. And all that is dependent on things like flexibility and core strength, and more from an athletic perspective than just from a pure fit perspective.
Okay.
So, you can augment the better shape you're in, the more you can augment your fit. You really can.
Now I had David had a question here of how high should the seat be?
There's no height, but like I said, you should have about a 15-degree bend in your knee when your foot is at the bottom of the pedal. So if you put the pedal down at the 6 o'clock point and put your foot in it, you should have a slight 15-degree bend in your knee. You don't want your leg to be straight, because then you're losing power at the bottom of the stroke, and you also don't want it to be really bent, because that means you're not putting enough into it. So that's about the general rule of thumb for that. So
now when at what point do I decide to go and get myself a professional bike fit? Because again, if I'm new to the sport, I've shelled out some money for my bike. Depending on how much my bike cost, is whether or not I would want to, eyeball the fit, I guess, or just, some general fitting. What's the advice you give on, hey, you know what? You need to go and get a professional fit?
I say anytime you're not comfortable on the bike. And usually what happens is at the shorter distances, you tend not to notice discomfort that much. You might just rack it up to, I was kind of out of shape. My back hurt a little bit today, blah, blah, blah. But as you start to get to the longer and longer distances, discomfort shows up quickly. After you've been on your bike for more than an hour and a half, if there's anything bothering you, it's going to become painfully apparent. And that's when I say, as soon as you're uncomfortable for any length of time, it's probably a good idea to go get a bike fit. And there's usually a couple levels. There are people who'll charge $300-400 for a bike fit, and there are other people who'll charge $75 to $100 for a bike fit. And you get a slightly different level of service on each one of those. And you can determine, how important. If you just want to be comfortable, I'd say the $75 fit is probably fine. It'll probably do everything you need it to do. If you want to be comfortable, but you also want to maximize, your efficiency on the bike, then that $375 one is probably the way for you to go. You know, if you want to, especially if you're doing something with an aero, like a tri bike, that $375 fit's probably more useful because the person who fits you can fit you in the aero position. They can fit you when you're not in the aero position. You know, they can give you advice on fore aft movement, you know, how high the bar should be, whether they should be pointing up, whether they should be flat, all those kind of things, which are, you know, a bit more than what your general bike fit is going to give you.
And one of the things I noticed too, you know, with the fit, as you pointed out, with shorter distances, there's a certain point on that fit where it may feel like this works, it's perfect, and then you go, you know, 2 miles above that, and it's like, you know what?
Right.
The perfect fit for a 25-mile bike ride, but at mile 27, all the alarm bells are going off.
This is very true.
Or this was perfect for, you know, a 50-miler, but, you know, right at 56, it just, you know, the best way I describe it is kind of like if you have a little pebble in your shoe. It's like,
right.
If you're just walking outside, it's no big deal. But if you're like you're running a race 5 miles in or something, it's like, man, you feel like if you have a boulder in there, even though it's just a little pebble.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's why I say, especially when you're doing the longer distances, the bike fit becomes like key, because I mean, if you've done longer races, you've done Ironman. I've only gone up to the half iron distance, but I mean, I know for a fact if you get to mile 40 and something's hurting, you know, you're in a world of that last 16 miles is gonna, like, it may not take that long, but it's gonna feel like it takes forever, you know.
Time stands still.
It does. It really does.
When you're not comfortable. When you're not comfortable.
You start seeing the hands on the clock go backwards, you know.
Yeah.
It's painful.
It just drags on, like, wow, you know. So definitely getting the right fit as you change distances, because that definitely comes into play, you know.
And in fact, when I was bike racing, my bike coach used to recommend that we get a fit at the beginning of every year, because especially if you take time off the bike over the winter, which a lot of people do, you know, you come back, you may have gained weight, you may have lost weight, you know, you may be less flexible, you know, you may have developed an injury of some sort, you know, especially for older athletes, you know, things change drastically rather quickly, as I can attest to. So, you know, he used to recommend like a fit every single year. I mean, you don't have to get like, you know, the $375 one, but have somebody take a look at you, you know, just and you know, go out for a long ride, don't push anything, and see how you feel, you know.
Yeah, no, that I'm probably on every couple seasons where something has to be tweaked, where it's you know, it was aero and comfortable one season, and it's no longer comfortable. It's still aero, but it's no longer comfortable a couple seasons later, where you just got to change the position, just, you know, because of your flexibility, your range of motion, whatever it is. You know, if you're putting on more weight, losing weight, whatever it is, you know, all those little nuances kind of take their toll on the fit as well.
Absolutely. One of the things that I highly recommend that people do. Let me see what's the best way to put this. For the bike fit is hang on. I have a list of things that we used to do. Now it's escaping me. I'll come back to it when I remember. But,
okay.
Yeah. So we can move on. So,
okay, no problem. When you remember, just let.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Yeah. So, but so that's the key thing is making sure that you have you know, a good bike fit as you go through. So, well, I want to thank you for the information that you've shared. So, you know, gearing and cadences, you know, some basic things that athletes need to figure out. You're, you know, sticking with a distance while you master it before thinking of doing the next distance might be a good idea.
That's right. Master your discipline. That's what we say. Master your discipline.
Master your discipline. Well, that's a good way of putting it. Well, if folks are looking for you, I know they can find you on your. I posted your your Facebook group where people can come to you. I know you run your cycling studio where a lot of our athletes come in and work out. And before I let you go, lots of folks are riding on either trainers, heading outdoors, or they've got stationary bikes, spin studios, Peloton, things like that. How does all of that how does my indoor training on a trainer or a Peloton stationary bike, how do I convert that into outdoors?
So, as you know, I'm a big fan of the trainer. I mean, one of the reasons I'm a big fan is just because time is a factor for me. So the trainer allows me to get in a good workout without, having to get outside and, fight traffic and, all the things that come with riding outdoors, driving to wherever you're starting from and all that kind of stuff. So the trainer, and the other thing about the trainer is, anybody who's come to the studio knows that my mantra is we never stop pedaling, right? Once you start to work out, you never stop pedaling. So when you do an hour workout in the studio, you pedal for the whole hour. Like, you don't get that outdoors, right?
True.
You got stop signs, you got to slow down, you're going to stop here, stop. When we do an hour in the studio, you get the whole hour. So I'm a big fan of that, particularly for new athletes, because it maximizes their time working out. And that's key, because one of the things that volume is a big part of cycling. Mileage is huge, and you can do a lot of mileage without getting hurt in cycling because it's non-weight bearing. So the more mileage you can get and the more pedal resolutions you can put in is huge. So I'm a huge fan of getting on a trainer. And the other thing I really like about the trainer is you can be really focused and really structured. Like, one of the things that one of the first questions I ask at our clinics is, I say, okay, who rode this weekend? A whole bunch of hands go up. I rode. I was like, all right, what was the purpose of your ride? And they look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean the purpose? I thought I'd just go out and ride. It's like, no. We have a focus. When we come in, we're working on something. We're working on being able to generate more power for an hour. Or we're working on being able to, work on climbing stronger, or we're working on being able to spin faster. We have a set purpose to this structured workout. And that's what the trainer is really good at. I mean, really, really good at. And you're going to get every single minute of, like, if you got a 5-minute hill to climb on the trainer, you're climbing it for all 5 minutes. You can't quit. The trainer's not going to let you quit. And if you try to slow down, the trainer's just going to make it harder.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of getting people on the trainer. It really, really maximizes their time on the bike.
Yeah, that is.
I want you on your bike. I don't want you on a Peloton. Not so much because I have anything against Peloton.
Okay.
But you're comfortable on your own bike.
On my own bike.
You're going to ride outside. So, if you're doing all your time on the Peloton, then you come on outside and your bike's not set up the same way, you're not going to feel the same. You're going to feel different. It's not going to be as comfortable. Your hand position will be different, So I want people on their own bike, so that if they're riding for an hour, I want them to find out before they even get on the road, hey, this isn't really comfortable, Yeah. I want them to know that. I want that saddle. It doesn't feel good. I need a new saddle. That's a common complaint among
right.
The saddle, because usually when you get a bike, the saddle is just like, this is what we had in the shop. We just put that on there, You know what saddle you want, you're getting whatever comes with the bike. So
I got one last question. A big door to open here.
Okay.
As I wind down. Heart rate, perceived exertion, power meter.
Okay.
How am I unpacking these? Which one should I be using? When should I be using one or the other?
Yeah.
Make sense of that for the beginners who are listening, as well as for the experienced strugglers out there who have been in the sport for a minute.
Sure. So all of those work to some extent. But power is obviously the gold standard, right?
Okay.
If you get a power meter, you'll know exactly what you're doing or exactly what you should be doing, right? Of course, it's expensive. And the other thing is you really got to understand what you're doing when you're using it, right? It's not like, it's not like perceived exertion where you're like, all right, I feel like this is hard. So when, I say go hard, you know what that is.
Right.
You know what hard is and you know what easy is. But, there are variations between there's really hard and kind of hard and not that hard, that kind of stuff. So they'll all work to some extent. I tell most people, like, I think heart rate is the good medium to start with, because it tells you a couple of things that are useful. One is it'll tell you when you're going hard. It'll tell you when you're not. It'll also do things like tell you when you need to rest, tell you when you're getting sick, all those kind of things if you pay attention to it. And it's not super expensive, and you don't have to need like a PhD in physics to understand how to use it. So heart rate is nice. And then if you move up to a power meter, heart rate's still important. So it's not like you lose anything by having it. I usually say perceived exertion is for people who've been in the sport for a while and know what stuff it feels like. They know, like, when you get to mile 80 of an Ironman, how you should feel.
Right.
And when you're having a bad day and when you're on a good ride, because you've been there. But, the first time you hit that 80-mile mark, you may not be like, so you may feel great, but that might still be the time when you should kind of cool it because, you know what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
So perceived exertion, I think, is more for people who've been in that sport for a while and have enough experience to use it, wisely. I think it's hard for someone who hasn't done it very often to know, I feel okay right now, but am I feeling too, maybe should I back off because I do feel this good, or maybe I don't.
It feels good until it doesn't.
Right, exactly. And I've had a lot of my best races. I actually felt really bad at the beginning, like for some reason, it took me, maybe 30 minutes to really hit the go button for whatever reason. So perceived exertion can be really tricky to figure out, particularly when you're learning like nutrition and things like that. It can be kind of difficult. Well, heart rate is kind of the happy medium, and power, like I say, once you get power and you understand power is like amazing. I mean, I have a power meter on every bike I own. So, and I go out and I set goals for my races. Like I want to ride, this far at this power for this long, and
right.
Sometimes it's because I know I can do it, and sometimes because I want to see if I can do it, and things like that. But the one thing about power is it's non-discriminatory. If you've done it before and you can do it and you don't want to go too hard or go too easy, power guarantee. It doesn't matter if it's windy, doesn't matter if it's raining. If you're doing 200 watts, you're doing 200 watts, period. Now
right.
You might not be going as fast because of the headwind, but it's still 200 watts. It doesn't matter. So power is definitely the way to go if you can afford it and you're willing to put in the time to understand what you need to know about it. So.
I love that. Yeah, I finally got a power meter last season, so I've only got to use it once.
Which one did you get?
I've got to look at it. I think it's a Pioneer.
Is it the crank based or is it pedals or what?
Yes, the crank.
Crank. Okay.
Yeah, I think mine is dual left and right, I believe.
Okay. Yep.
So, but again, it's lived on the trainer for the past year and a half. But again, with training on a trainer, working out at your whatever FTP with power, that's when you really start to feel, hey, here's what it should feel like when I'm out racing. So
right.
But up until this point is definitely been heart rate or perceived effort for me. So I'm really excited about whenever the next race happens to actually see what the power meter reading it, compared to on the trainer, you're looking at it and it's controlling it for you.
Right. What you do is you set a little alarm. You say I want to stay between, just as an example, 180 and 200 watts. You set that on your bike computer, and anytime you go below that, a bell goes off. You're like, oh, I gotta put a little more effort in. Every time you go above it, a bell goes off. You're like, okay, I gotta hold back a little bit.
Okay,
that keeps you, keeps you honest.
I'm gonna have to look at my gadget and figure out all the settings to set up some parameters like that.
Yeah. I mean, you know me. I'm a data geek.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I have all that stuff. Like I have my computer tells me when to drink, tells me when to eat, tells me everything. You know? The only thing I do is look at the road and pedal.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll definitely be stopping by to have my setup, checked out to make sure it's good before I actually hit my first event. So
oh yeah, definitely. I'd love to help.
But anyway, Coach Robert, I appreciate you taking the time to chit chat all things cycling, the duathlon, and the distances and everything like that. So really, really appreciate it.
Hey man, always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure.
All right, you have a good one.
All right, you too, man.
Like the video, make sure you hit the like button, share, subscribe, and hit the notification button.